When you think about life, most people imagine it as a random journey filled with ups and downs. Some are lucky, others aren't, and all we can do is survive. But what if I told you life is not random at all? What if life is more like a game? A designed system with principles, rules, and patterns that never change. And the only reason so many people feel stuck, broke, or defeated is because they're unknowingly playing the game without ever learning how it works. Think about it. A game only feels frustrating when you don't know the rules. Imagine sitting down at a chessboard for the very first time, not knowing how each piece moves. You'll lose every time. Not because you're dumb, not because you're unlucky, but simply because you don't understand the rules. The same is true for life. People get crushed financially, emotionally, and spiritually because they're reacting instead of playing with strategy. They're on the board, but they don't know the game. And here's the truth most people don't realize. Reality itself has laws. It's not chaos. Just as gravity pulls you down whether you're rich or poor, whether you believe it or not, the principles that govern wealth, freedom, and purpose are just as real. Align with them and you rise. Ignore them and you struggle. Life isn't about luck, it's about alignment. But here's where it gets even deeper. Society doesn't want you to know this. Schools train you to obey, not to create. Jobs train you to follow, not to lead. Media distracts you with noise so you never pause to see the bigger picture. And slowly, without even noticing, you get trapped. You play someone else's game, with someone else's rules, hoping for results that were never designed for you. That's why people spend years grinding but still feel empty, because effort without alignment is wasted energy. The Bible confirms this truth. In Genesis, God's first words to man were not about survival, but about fruitfulness. Be fruitful, multiply, replenish the earth, subdue it, and have dominion. That's not the language of victims. That's not the voice of someone telling you to wait for rescue. That is the Creator giving you authority, creativity, and power to shape reality. In other words, God didn't put you here to just play the game. He designed you to master it. But here's the catch. If you don't know who you are, and you don't know the rules, you'll live life like a pawn when you were called to be a king. You'll shrink, settle, and wait for permission, while reality keeps moving without you. And the longer you stay blind to the principles, the more the game plays you instead of you playing it. I learned this the hard way. For years, I thought my struggle was bad luck. I worked hard, sacrificed sleep, did everything people said was the right way, but money slipped away. Opportunities seemed out of reach. It felt like reality was against me. But then it hit me. It wasn't reality that was against me. It was me who was out of alignment. I was trying to win a game without ever learning the rules. The moment I began to study principles, both from science and the Word of God, everything shifted. I stopped seeing life as punishment and started treating it as a system that could be understood, navigated, and mastered. And this is the shift I want to invite you into. Because once you realize life is a game, you no longer take failure personally. You no longer assume success is only for the chosen few. You recognize it's about playing differently. The people you admire, the wealthy, the influential, the free, they're not necessarily smarter or luckier. They just discovered the rules earlier. They understood vibration, alignment, sowing and reaping, discipline, and focus. And they started playing consciously while the rest of the world stayed in reaction mode. So here's the question. Are you ready to stop being a pawn in someone else's system? Are you ready to stop reacting to life and instead start playing the game the way it was designed? Because the moment you learn the rules, the game changes. And the truth is, God already set it up in your favor. You just have to learn how to play. Here's the truth that most people don't want to admit. Most of us are not actually playing life. We're being played by it. We're not strategizing. We're reacting. We're not moving by design. We're moving by default. And the system loves it that way. Because when you don't understand the rules of the game, you'll spend your whole life working hard inside someone else's strategy while thinking you're making progress on your own. Think about it. From the moment you're born, the game starts. You don't choose the family you're born into, the language you first hear, the religion, the culture, or even the beliefs about money and success you inherit. All of it is handed to you as if that's just the way things are. And without realizing it, You accept a version of reality that was programmed long before you had the ability to question it. That's why some people grow up believing wealth is evil, while others are told it's their birthright. Same game, different programming. The problem is, most never question the script. They go through school, memorizing facts they'll never use, chasing grades as if those grades measure their true value. And by the time they graduate, they've been trained to equate success with approval, obedience with safety, and conformity with survival. They think they're being prepared for life, but in reality, they're being programmed to play a role in someone else's design. Jobs continue the cycle. You get hired, and suddenly your worth is tied to a salary someone else decided. Your time is traded for money, your creativity is boxed into a position description, and your future is capped by promotions that may or may not ever come. You think you're playing the game because you're earning, but really, you're just a pawn moving on someone else's board. And here's the kicker. The system doesn't care how much you grind. As long as you don't learn the higher rules, your grind will always benefit the ones who set the board. This is why so many believers end up broke or frustrated, even though they love God and work hard. They think effort equals breakthrough. But God never said that. He said alignment brings fruitfulness. Genesis doesn't command Adam and Eve to just survive or work harder. He gave them dominion, power to shape, multiply, and subdue. That's not the mindset of an employee waiting for a paycheck. That's the mindset of a creator who understands the system. But most people are stuck in reaction mode. Something happens, they react. Bills come due, they panic. An opportunity arises, they hesitate. Someone criticizes, they shrink back. That cycle becomes their whole life, responding to external pressures instead of designing their moves. And just like in chess, a player who only reacts will always lose to the one who knows the strategy. I used to live like that. I thought the harder I worked, the better life would get. But no matter how much I pushed, money slipped through my hands. It was like chasing the wind. Then one day it clicked. The reason I kept losing wasn't because life was unfair. It was because I didn't know the rules. I was in the game, but the game was playing me. And this is exactly what happens to millions of people. They scroll endlessly on their phones, comparing themselves to others, believing they're falling behind. They work jobs that drain them, but never pause to ask, whose game am I really playing? They consume media designed to keep them fearful, angry, or distracted, never realizing those emotions are part of the system's design. And in that fog, their God-given power to create, multiply, and dominate lies dormant. But here's the freedom. Once you see the game, you can't unsee it. Once you realize you've been programmed, you can choose to deprogram. Once you wake up, you stop reacting and start playing with intention. That's when the whole board shifts in your favor. Jesus hinted at this when he said, "The truth will set you free." Notice he didn't say hard work sets you free, or waiting for luck sets you free. He said truth, the knowledge of reality, the awareness of the rules, breaks the chains. Because the moment you understand reality as a system, you stop stumbling in the dark and start moving with precision. And that's the first step to outsmarting the game, admitting you've been played. Admitting that culture, school, jobs, and even well-meaning family handed you a script that doesn't reflect God's original design. Admitting that you've been busy reacting instead of intentionally creating. Admitting that the wealth, freedom, and dominion promised to God's people were never withheld. It's just that most have been distracted into playing someone else's strategy. But once you accept this, you reclaim your power. Because if the system could program you, then you can also reprogram yourself. This time according to the truth of God's word. And when you do, life stops being a series of random frustrations and starts becoming a game you actually know how to win. Once you realize you've been played, the natural question is, so what now? Do you keep reacting to the system, or do you learn how to outsmart it? Because here's the beautiful truth. While most people keep following the script blindly, you don't have to. The moment you wake up, you can begin to flip the board in your favor. Outsmarting the system doesn't mean fighting it head-on, because the system is bigger than you. If you try to fight it directly, you'll wear yourself out. That's like a chess pawn trying to tackle the queen. It doesn't work. Outsmarting means learning the rules so well that you can use them differently. It's about seeing how the game operates and then stepping outside of the trap others don't even realize they're in. Think about Jesus. He came into a system dominated by Rome, controlled by religious elites, bound by political and economic oppression. Did he try to overthrow Caesar by force? No. He introduced a kingdom that operated on higher principles. Where Rome collected taxes, Jesus multiplied bread. Where Pharisees hoarded power, Jesus empowered fishermen. Where society said wealth came from exploitation, Jesus said give and it will be given to you. He didn't play by their rules. He revealed another level of the game entirely. That's the same shift you and I have to make. Instead of being consumed by the cycle of bills, jobs, and debt, we start asking, what's the higher rule here? What principle did God put into place before the system ever existed? And once you find it, you align with it. Because principles never fail. Systems can collapse, economies can crash, governments can fall, but principles are eternal. The system says, work harder, longer hours, hustle until you burn out. God's principle says, align with fruitfulness. Create, multiply, rest, and trust. The system says, wait until you're certified, approved, promoted. God's principle says, start with what's in your hand and go. The system says, money is scarce, and you better compete for it. God's principle says, abundance flows from obedience to his design. That's how you outsmart the game. You stop reacting to man-made rules and start living by the eternal ones. I had to learn this the hard way. For years, I thought the only way to break free was to grind harder than everyone else. I was trapped in a cycle of exhaustion, and every time I thought I was about to break through, another wall would appear. Then I realized the truth. I wasn't failing because I lacked effort. I was failing because I was obeying the wrong rules. I was still playing by the world's board, expecting God's results. So I began to experiment. Instead of asking, how much harder can I push? I started asking, what's the principle I need to align with here? When I embraced generosity, doors opened. When I honored rest, creativity flowed. When I stopped waiting for permission and acted on God's assignment, opportunities multiplied. That's when I understood the system was never designed to let me win, but the kingdom was. The system thrives on fear. Fear keeps you working jobs you hate, buying things you don't need, chasing approval from people who don't even care. Outsmarting it means recognizing fear for what it is, the system's leash. And the moment you break it, you're free to act boldly. Remember David? Everyone else was paralyzed by the fear of Goliath. David saw the same giant, but he wasn't playing the same game. He wasn't measuring himself against Goliath. He was measuring Goliath against God. Different rules, different outcome. And that's the invitation for you. Stop measuring your life by the system's standards, titles, salaries, likes, applause. Start measuring by the principles of the kingdom. Are you multiplying what God placed in your hand? Are you being fruitful where you are? Are you stepping into dominion instead of shrinking back? Because the system won't give you permission, but God already gave you authority. Here's the paradox. When you outsmart the system by aligning with God's principles, you actually start to succeed inside the very system that tried to play you. Because people can't ignore fruit. When you create, produce, and multiply, the system may still be broken, but it has to respond to results. That's why Joseph rose to power in Egypt, Daniel in Babylon, Esther in Persia. They didn't fight the system with rebellion. They outsmarted it with wisdom, excellence, and alignment with God's calling. So the question is no longer, how do I survive the system? The real question is, how do I outsmart it by living from a higher set of rules? Because once you stop being played and you start playing with wisdom, the game changes entirely. Suddenly you're not scrambling for scraps, you're shaping outcomes. You're not begging for opportunity, you're creating it. You're not waiting for breakthrough, you're becoming the breakthrough. That's what it means to outsmart the game of reality. Not to fight endlessly against it, but to step into the design God set before it. And once you do, you'll realize the system never had the final say. You do when you choose to play from the higher board. There was a time in my life when I thought survival was all there was. Go to school, get the grades, graduate, find a job, work, sleep, repeat. That was the script I inherited, not because I consciously chose it, but because it was handed down to me by culture, by family, by the system. And for a while, I believed that was the only way to live. But deep down, I felt empty. I was working hard, but I wasn't free. I was surviving, not thriving. And then one day, I had this shocking realization. Life is not random. It's not some cruel punishment. It's not even a chaotic mystery. Life is a game. A game with rules, with principles, with systems that God Himself designed from the beginning. And like any game, if you don't know the rules, you lose by default. But the moment you understand the principles, the moment you play with awareness instead of blindly reacting, the game changes. You stop being a pawn and you become a player. You stop being tossed around by circumstances and you start creating your reality on purpose. This was the shift for me. I stopped seeing myself as a victim of chance and I started realizing I had authority. That awareness turned everything around. It wasn't instant, but it was radical. And I want to walk you through the same journey, because this is how you outsmart reality. The first key was awareness. Reality doesn't respond to how hard you grind. It responds to your inner state, your vibration, your faith, your imagination. The Bible says, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." That's not just a poetic verse. That's the law of the game. If you think small, you'll live small. If you imagine lack, you'll attract lack. But if you begin to carry fruitfulness inside of you, if you imagine it, if you align with it, you create the conditions for it to appear outside. I realized that even when I was broke, what kept me stuck wasn't the zero in my bank account. It was the poverty mindset replaying in my subconscious. I was programmed to expect struggle, so struggle kept finding me. Awareness exposed the lie and gave me the power to shift. The second key was responsibility. This was hard for me because for years I waited for someone else to rescue me. An opportunity, a connection, a miracle check in the mail. I was praying for God to move, but ignoring the fact that He had already given me authority. Genesis says He gave man dominion. That means we're not meant to sit around waiting for permission or for luck to land in our lap. Responsibility is realizing no one's coming to save you. You've already been equipped to save yourself by walking in the authority God gave. The day I stopped blaming circumstances or family or society and said, if it's going to change, it's on me, that was the day things started shifting in my favor. The third key was action. Awareness and responsibility mean nothing if you don't move. For years I delayed, analyzing, doubting, waiting until I felt ready. But the truth is, readiness never comes. Action comes first. Confidence follows. And when I began to apply new habits, waking up with purpose, choosing focus over distraction, investing in learning instead of wasting time, practicing discipline instead of waiting for motivation, my external world began to reflect it. It wasn't glamorous. It was messy. I failed plenty of times. But the failures became feedback. And the feedback built wisdom. That wisdom turned into results. The fourth key was the spiritual anchor. Because without this, it's easy to drift back into fear. What gave me stability was trusting that God's design already positioned me for expansion. Genesis doesn't just say be fruitful. It continues. Multiply, replenish, subdue, and have dominion. That's the blueprint. God didn't create you to shrink. He created you to expand, to be fruitful in ideas, multiply in impact, replenish the earth with solutions, subdue obstacles, and have dominion over your field. When I anchored myself in that truth, I stopped asking, can I do this? And started declaring, God already designed me for this. This is the game changer. You don't need to beg reality to change. You outsmart it by aligning with the principles that were already written into creation. And here's the wild part. When you live this way, people around you start noticing. Not because you were desperate for their applause, but because results speak louder than approval. Your obedience becomes someone else's permission to believe it's possible for them too. So let me bring this home to you. Maybe right now you're in survival mode, repeating the script society gave you. School, work, bills, stress, repeat. Maybe you feel like no matter how hard you grind, you never get ahead. Maybe you're waiting for that one break, that one miracle, that one open door. I'm telling you, the door is already open. The game is already designed in your favor. But you have to play it with awareness. You have to step into responsibility. You have to move into action. And you have to anchor yourself spiritually so you don't get shaken by the chaos around you. Because once you do, everything shifts. Wealth stops feeling impossible. Freedom stops feeling like a fantasy. Purpose stops feeling distant. You start creating consciously, not reacting blindly. You stop being another victim of the system, and you become the evidence that God's design works. The truth is simple but radical. Reality is not against you. It's responding to you. The question is, what are you sending it? Fear or faith? Doubt or vision? Scarcity or fruitfulness? Because the moment you take control of that, you outsmart the game. And when you outsmart the game, you stop just surviving. You start living.